Yo, what's up? Bringing you that MLB The Show 16. We have some Diamond Dynasty action in the background, but we're going to be talking more about MLB The Show 17 and franchise mode. So the best way to sum up the features in franchise mode this year is that they wanted to make it easier to access these new features and easier to get through a full season, if that makes sense. But let's get into what we have to talk about. So right after you pick your team, the first screen that you see is the task. These include coaching task, player development task, general manager task, and some examples of these tasks are setting your lineup, scouting, drafting, managing the 40-man roster, trades, and stuff like that. So they show these to you first, so you can choose if you want to manually manage all of these tasks or auto manage them, and you can change these whenever you want throughout the season. So after that, a screen pops up and that indicates if you want to go to spring training or start the regular season. Simply just an option for you guys if you want to skip spring training and head right to the regular season. There is a new menu screen and tabs. These include home, team, acquisitions, league, and options. Basically just visually easier to see everything that's going on in the franchise. Next, we have something new, and that is franchise starter missions. So the best way to describe these, and this is the way that they describe them, is these missions are a roadmap of things that you can expect to do in franchise mode. So the starter missions are pretty basic. They include things like looking at your team goals, scouting players, negotiating with coaches and players, and stuff like that. My hope is that there is more missions, mainly statistical missions that you can track throughout your season. For example, just getting a certain amount of hits per season as a team or as a player, home runs, strikeouts, stuff like that. I should also mention that completing these franchise starter missions do get you stubs and XP for completing them. So now on to the ways that you can play the games in franchise. So the newest way is by playing in critical situations. So the way that these prompt is by simming games, and if a situation pops up, you can choose to go into that game or continue simming. So critical situations do not happen every game, so keep that in note if you're someone that is simming just to get a critical situation. Now, what are critical situations? These include coming into the game in the 9th inning to pick up a save or get a walk-off hit. There's statistical situations where if a player has 2 home runs, they may bring you into the game to try to get that 3rd home run, or if a player is trying to get the cycle, and I'm sure there's more situations. So say you go into a critical situation and fail. We will say you blew the save and are going into extra innings now. You continue playing that game like normal. You know, if you fail that situation, you still continue the game and just play it out, or you can back out and sim the rest of the game. But that is pretty much the basics of what critical situations are. Next, we have player lock, and this is something that is not new. It wasn't MLB 16. It's just easier to access now. So in MLB 16, you would have to start the game, and where you are looking at your lineup, you would choose the player and then lock onto that player. Now in MLB 17, there is a whole new menu to choose between these modes. So you would choose the player lock mode, and then it will take you to your lineup, and then you choose which player you want to be. So it's just overall easier to access and do what you want to do. Now, if you don't know how the player lock system works, it's like Road to the Show. You're one player throughout the game doing all his fielding and hitting situations. In addition to that, you're not stuck with one player throughout the season. You can choose to player lock on a different player each game if that's what you wanted to do. Next, we have quick manage. So this is something that has kind of been in the game before also, but for MLB 17, it's a little bit more advanced. So for quick manage, you are basically making the decisions for your team and what you want your players to do. So when you're pitching, you can choose to straight up pitch for contact, pitch around the batter, or walk the batter. I didn't see what the hitting prompts are, but I can assume they're hit for contact, hit for power, bunt, take a pitch, stuff like that. So with quick manage, it speeds up the game. You're making the decisions, but if you are in a big situation, you can hop into the game and play that situation off or finish off the game. Kind of like a critical situation, but you get to see the overall progress of the game and how everything is turning out. And like I said, if you want to jump into that game, you can. In addition to that, you can also play the situation and then go back to quick managing the game and finishing it off that way. So those are the ways that you can play games in franchise mode this year, with addition to the regular 9-inning games. Next, we have probably the biggest new addition, and that is player quirks. So the best way to describe player quirks are player traits that can enhance your player's ability to hit or pitch, or simply attribute boost. So for a hitter, some examples of quirks are hitting better when the player has 2 strikes, performing better when there are runners on base, performing better in the 9th inning. For pitchers, we have excels at throwing strikes or striking out batters, limiting walks, throwing an effective pitch like a fastball, breaking ball, changeup, stuff like that. But there is more. Altogether, they said that there is over 20 quirks, so you can expect a variety of those. So what player quirks do is change your PCI, which is your plate coverage indicator. If you don't know what that is, it's the yellow brackets you see on the screen right now when I'm hitting. The PCI is like your player's vision, so it helps with timing and contact if you locate the pitch correctly. And all quirks do stack up, so if a player has multiple quirks, the PCI will get bigger. So during the stream, I saw someone ask, what if I don't use the PCI? So I'm guessing there's someone that uses directional hitting or pure analog and not zone hitting. The PCI, whether you use it or not, is always in effect. It's always there. So if you don't use it, if you're not manually moving it, basically the AI is affecting where it goes. And right now you see on screen the PCI. You saw me move it down to the bottom left. So that's what the PCI is. And depending on the quirks and if they're active or activated, that PCI will get bigger. So whether you use the PCI or not, the player quirks will still be in effect. So the player will still get the attribute boost. You just are not the one manually moving the PCI. So some quick notes on player quirks. Some are dynamic, meaning you can gain them or lose them throughout the season. Quirks are generated for prospects, and quirks are in Road to the Show and Diamond Dynasty. So all the quirks are not in Diamond Dynasty. There's some of the quirks. So franchise has all the quirks, and Diamond Dynasty has some. They did briefly mention it, but I don't know specifically which ones are in Diamond Dynasty and which are not. But just keep that in note. It will make some sort of difference. And these player quirks are to give attribute boosts. So you're definitely going to want to look at all the players on your team and look at their player quirks so you can put them into the situations where they can thrive in. But finally, about franchise, there is a new budget feature that looks at your weekly cash flow. So depending on how your team performs determines how much money you get per week, and that affects your overall budget. Your overall budget determines how much money you have to make acquisitions at the end of the season or during the season. So if you have a low cash flow and budget, you might have to make additional roster moves to increase your budget. Now, I don't think they mentioned if you can do like ticket prices or concession prices and stuff like that. It would be dope if you could, because that does play in effect in your budget, but I don't think you can actually manage that kind of stuff. Either way, this is all the information on franchise mode for MLB The Show 17. And really quick, because I never made a video about this, we'll mention presentation. So there is 2 new commentators, Harold Reynolds and Dan Plesac. And kind of with franchise, there is the MLB Network presentation. So what this does in franchise mode, there is designated games that have the MLB Network theme, and those are mainly big games or rival games. So not every game on the schedule is a MLB Network game, but there is specific games depending on the magnitude of that game, and those will have that theme. But if you want to just play on the MLB Network at all times, you could do that. So those are, a couple additional things in franchise mode and the game itself. But that is everything for franchise mode. Let me know what you guys think. Next week, we are getting the Road to the Show information, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching, and I'm out.